The lunch rush was in full swing at the elegant Grayson and Company. Bistro, the kind of upscale restaurant where reservations were booked weeks in advance, and the chandeliers cost more than some people's homes. Waiters glided between tables with the grace of ballet dancers, and soft classical music played beneath the hum of clinking glasses. Amelia, a young waitress with steady hands and a warm smile, moved swiftly between tables. She had only been working here for 6 months, but her charm, work ethic, and poise under pressure had already made her a favorite among the regulars, and a quiet target among those who underestimated her. She came from humble beginnings. Her mother was a nurse who worked double shifts, and her father had passed away when she was only 10. Amelia had dreams of becoming a chef someday, but for now, she balanced waitressing with night classes at the Culinary Institute downtown. That Thursday afternoon started like any other until Graham Vale walked in. Everyone in the restaurant seemed to pause as he entered, not because he was famous in the usual sense, but because people knew power when it walked into a room. Graham Vale was a billionaire investor with stakes in everything from tech startups to luxury hotels. Rumor had it he owned nearly a third of the city's high-end properties, including Grayson and Company itself. He didn't smile. He didn't greet anyone. He simply walked to a corner table and sat down, eyes fixed on his phone. The maitre d' scrambled to greet him, tripping over his own words. Graham waved him off. "I'll take it from here," he muttered. The maitre d' looked around nervously and flagged Amelia. "Can you please serve Mr. Vale? Just be careful," he whispered. Amelia nodded, grabbing a menu and heading over. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to start with—" "I don't need suggestions," Graham interrupted, not looking up. "Bring me the grilled halibut, no capers, double lemon, and make sure the greens aren't wilted this time." Amelia didn't flinch. She jotted the notes calmly. "Of course, sir. Anything to drink?" "Sparkling water, not that generic garbage. I want Perrier." She nodded and walked away. Behind her, another waitress rolled her eyes. "What a jerk," she mouthed. Amelia said nothing. As she placed his order with the kitchen, a strange tension began to build. Minutes later she returned with the water, chilled, with a lemon wedge, and gently set it on the table. That's when it happened. Graham glanced at the glass, frowned, and slowly looked up at her. "Do you think this is acceptable?" Amelia blinked. "Is there a problem, sir?" "You call this service? You're slow. You didn't repeat my order, and I don't like the way you're standing. Are you trying to look down on me?" The nearby tables fell silent. The maitre d' looked horrified. "I'm sorry you feel that way, sir," Amelia replied, calm but firm. "I assure you I'm doing my best to provide good service." "Your best?" he scoffed. "You're lucky to be working in a place like this. Do you even know who I am?" A flicker of something sparked in Amelia's eyes. "I know what you are," she said evenly. "But who you are, that remains to be seen." Gasps rippled from the nearby tables. Graham stood up abruptly, eyes blazing. "You're fired," he said coldly. "Get out, now!" Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the room like a knife. "She's not going anywhere!" All eyes turned. Standing near the kitchen door, in a tailored navy suit and polished shoes, was Elliot Grayson, the true owner of Grayson and Company, and a man not easily rattled. He walked forward slowly, his eyes locked on Graham. "You may own part of the building, Mr. Vale," Elliot said, "but you don't own my staff, and especially not Amelia." The silence was so thick, you could hear the heartbeat of the room. Graham's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Elliot turned to Amelia. "Go take a short break," he said gently. "I'll handle this." Amelia nodded, heart pounding, and walked toward the kitchen as everyone watched her, not with pity but with admiration. She hadn't just stood her ground. She'd said something that no one had ever dared say to Graham Vale before, and it had shaken him to his core. Amelia sat in the small break room at the back of the restaurant, her hands lightly trembling around a warm cup of tea one of the chefs had made for her. The adrenaline from the confrontation hadn't fully worn off, and though she had stood her ground, a knot of fear twisted in her stomach. Had she just ruined her chances of ever working in the city again? She'd heard stories. Powerful men like Graham Vale didn't forget, especially when someone embarrassed them publicly. It didn't matter who was right or wrong. People like him weren't used to being challenged, especially not by someone in an apron. Meanwhile, back in the dining room, Graham Vale remained standing by his table, his expression unreadable. Elliot Grayson, still composed but radiating quiet authority, faced him without flinching. "You should choose your words more carefully, Mr. Vale," Elliot said. "We built this restaurant on respect, for customers, for our staff, for every soul who walks through those doors. What you just did violated every principle we stand for." Graham gave a tight, bitter smile. "Principles are expensive, Elliot. And this city doesn't run on respect. It runs on results. You think one waitress is worth offending a stakeholder like me?" Elliot leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough that the nearby tables could still hear him. "She's worth more than 10 of you, because in 6 months, she's shown more grace and character under pressure than I've ever seen you display in all your years of investing in this place." People began whispering. Some were nodding. A few even clapped quietly under their breath. Graham scoffed and turned toward the door, grabbing his coat from the back of the chair. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "I can make things very uncomfortable for you, Elliot." But Elliot didn't blink. "Then do it. If this restaurant has to close because we defended someone's dignity, then so be it. At least we'll go down with our heads high." That line hit Graham like a slap. He turned and stormed out, the glass door swinging behind him with a sharp click. The restaurant exhaled. The tension lifted. One by one, diners began to clap. First hesitantly, then in full applause. Some even stood. Waiters looked at one another in disbelief. They'd never seen anything like it. Elliot nodded humbly to the crowd, then walked to the break room. Amelia looked up as he entered. Her expression was calm but confused. "Is he gone?" she asked. Elliot smiled. "He's gone." She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I'm sorry if I caused any trouble," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to." Elliot shook his head. "You did exactly what you should have. You stood up for yourself, with grace and courage. That's not something I ever want you to apologize for." "But he said I was fired," she whispered. Elliot chuckled softly. "He doesn't have the power to fire you. Only I do. And not only are you not fired—" He paused, reaching into his suit pocket. "I'd like to promote you." Amelia stared at him, blinking. "What?" "You've been shadowing the kitchen crew on your off hours. The head chef tells me you've got real potential. I was going to wait until next month, but after today, I think the timing's perfect." He placed a folded envelope on the table in front of her. "This is your official invitation to begin your training as a junior sous chef. Your shift as a waitress ends today. Tomorrow you start in the kitchen." Amelia's hands trembled again, but this time for a different reason. "You're serious?" she said, her voice cracking. "Very," Elliot replied, smiling. "We need people like you in leadership roles, people who speak with both heart and backbone." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that fell when dreams that once felt far away suddenly landed in your hands. She stood and hugged him, something no employee had ever dared do to Elliot Grayson. But he didn't mind. He patted her on the back gently and said, "Now go home and rest. You've earned it." As Amelia walked out through the dining room, the customers stood and clapped again. Some nodded at her. Others raised their glasses in quiet respect. But one woman, a regular named Ms. Carver, stood from her table and gently pressed a $100 bill into Amelia's hand. "For standing tall," she said simply. That night, Amelia walked home beneath the city lights, the air cool on her skin, her heart still catching up with everything that had happened. She thought it was over. But what she didn't know was that Graham Vale wasn't done yet, and what he did next would shock everyone, including himself. Graham Vale sat alone in his penthouse suite that overlooked the glowing skyline. The floor-to-ceiling windows no longer impressed him. Neither did the expensive whiskey in his hand, nor the custom leather chairs designed for his aching back. All he could think about was her, that waitress, Amelia, how she'd looked him in the eye and spoke without flinching. The strength in her voice had rattled something in him, something buried, something ugly. He'd spent his life being untouchable. Money solved everything. Money silenced everyone. But for the first time in years, someone had spoken to him not as a billionaire, not as a threat, but as a man who had lost his way, and that stung. He took another drink. Bitter. Why had Elliot taken her side so quickly? Why had the entire restaurant applauded her, not him? He stared down at his phone. An old email from Elliot sat unopened, the business partner he'd known since they were both 20-something idealists trying to build something meaningful. But somewhere along the way, Graham had stopped caring about the mission. It became about power, status, winning. But tonight, he'd lost. And it had been public. His assistant called. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up and walked to the mirror. The man looking back at him looked tired, hollow, maybe even ashamed. He remembered something Amelia had said, not just the line that shut him up, but the part about how her mother used to work 3 jobs while raising her. How dignity wasn't just about being respected, but about respecting others, even when no one's watching. He stared at himself. For the first time, the mirror didn't reflect a billionaire. It reflected a man who had forgotten how to be human. The next morning, the restaurant buzzed with quiet whispers as Amelia walked through the back door in a crisp white chef's jacket. It was too big on her, but the smile she wore made her look 10 feet tall. She was nervous, excited, grateful. Elliot welcomed her with a nod. "Kitchen's yours now," he said. "Show them what I see in you." She tied her apron, stepped onto the line, and got to work. Focused, precise, and fast. The other chefs watched, surprised by her instincts. Even the head chef, known for being gruff and hard to please, gave a small nod of approval. But around 11 a.m., the hostess whispered into Elliot's ear. "Graham Vale is here." Elliot frowned. "Alone?" "Yes, sir. No reservation?" Elliot stood up and walked toward the door. Graham was there, in jeans and a dark blazer, not his usual tailored suit. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but the arrogance was missing, replaced by something else, something softer. "I'm not here to fight," Graham said before Elliot could speak. "And I don't expect forgiveness." Elliot crossed his arms. "Then what do you want?" "To talk to her." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I need to say something," Graham said. "Not as a billionaire, just as a man who got it wrong." Elliot hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Follow me." Amelia was in the middle of prepping a salmon fillet when she turned and saw him standing by the kitchen door. She froze. He took a step closer, but not inside. His hands were out of his pockets, his voice quiet. "I came to say I'm sorry." Amelia said nothing. I acted like a man who forgot what respect even looks like, he continued. And you reminded me, not by yelling, not by insulting me, but by speaking the truth, even though it could have cost you everything. Still, Amelia said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence was a mirror. I'm donating $50,000, he said suddenly, to a foundation for working single mothers, in your mother's name. That made her eyes flicker. And, he added, I'd like to fund your culinary education if you're ever interested. No strings attached, just a thank you. For the lesson. Now Amelia stepped forward. She studied him carefully, searching for the trick, the arrogance, the angle. But all she saw was a man trying, for once, not to be the biggest voice in the room. I don't need your money, she said softly. But I appreciate the gesture. If you really mean it, help others who need it more. Graham nodded slowly. I will. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said over his shoulder, you shook me up. And I think I needed it. That evening, a letter arrived at the restaurant. Handwritten. No assistance, no signature. It read, When someone makes you feel small, speak with truth. When they try to take your dignity, hold your head high. Because even giants can fall, and sometimes they're waiting for someone brave enough to knock. A man relearning grace. Elliot placed the letter in a small frame and hung it in the back office. And Amelia? She didn't talk much about that day, but she never forgot it. Because sometimes standing your ground doesn't just protect you. It changes the person who tried to knock you down. 3 weeks passed. The story of the billionaire and the waitress had quietly spread beyond the restaurant walls, not through tabloids or headlines, but through whispered conversations among regulars, local chefs, and industry workers who had long grown tired of being stepped on. But for Amelia, life had changed. Not because people were talking, but because she finally had a seat at the table. Elliot had made her a junior partner, not just in name, but in decision-making. She was now responsible for new menu development, staff training, and a small community outreach program Elliot had always dreamed of starting. And she didn't waste a second. Every morning she arrived before the others. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She worked not for power, but with purpose. One Friday evening, as the restaurant buzzed with a dinner crowd, Elliot walked in with a small smile. There's someone here to see you, he said. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Another food critic? Nope, someone more intimidating. She stepped out front and saw Mrs. Henderson, her high school teacher, the woman who once told her that strength wasn't loud. It was steady. Tears welled up in the older woman's eyes. I saw the write-up in the local journal. I had to come. Amelia hugged her tight, the years between them falling away like dust. And then she noticed someone standing behind her. Quiet, unassuming. It was Graham, but this time he didn't approach like a king inspecting his kingdom. He stood humbly, holding a tray of food. Not plated, just packaged, homemade. Amelia blinked in surprise. Thought I'd stop by the soup kitchen down the block, Graham said. Turns out cooking's harder than I thought. She laughed, genuinely. You cooked that? I followed your YouTube video, burned the first batch. This one might still be edible, though. She shook her head, amused. What made you decide to cook? He hesitated. I visited my first homeless shelter last week. Talked to a single mom with 2 kids. She reminded me of the story you told me, about your mom. It stuck. Amelia looked at him carefully. This wasn't performative. He wasn't here for applause. And so she offered something rare, a smile of respect. I'm glad you listened, she said. He nodded, and for the first time, there was peace between them. 2 months later. The restaurant's walls were covered in new photos, snapshots of local heroes. A janitor who worked 3 jobs to send his daughter to college, a delivery driver who returned a lost $10,000 tip, and Amelia's mother, a smiling photo of her in a faded diner uniform, holding Amelia as a baby. Above the display, in golden letters, "Dignity doesn't beg for permission, it just stands." Amelia had taken over as co-owner now. Elliot had stepped back, proudly watching her blossom into the kind of leader the industry needed. Firm but fair, humble but unshakably strong. As for Graham Vale, he sold off a portion of his luxury holdings and used the funds to start a scholarship program for hospitality workers. His name wasn't attached. That had been Amelia's one request. Help, but don't make it about you. And he had listened. In one quiet gesture that no one saw coming, Graham mailed a box to the restaurant. Inside it, a check for $250,000. No note, just one inscription, "In honor of those who reminded me what it means to be human." Final scene. One rainy afternoon, Amelia stood by the window of the restaurant, sipping coffee. A young waitress struggled at the corner table with a rude customer. The girl looked flustered, holding back tears. Amelia walked over slowly, gently placed her hand on the girl's shoulder, and smiled at the customer. "Is there a problem?" she asked calmly. The man huffed. "She's too slow, can't keep up." Amelia didn't raise her voice, but her words carried weight. "Well, sir," she said with a smile, "some of the best people I've ever met were once told the same thing. Turns out those people just needed someone to believe in them." The man blinked, embarrassed, silent. The young waitress looked up, surprised, relieved. And Amelia? She just walked away, calm and collected. Because she knew. Sometimes the person you defend today becomes the one who changes the world tomorrow.